nucleus has a nucleolus on the inside. Sometimes there are multiple nuclei, and that's how you can tell. But usually stainable in a round circle. If this troph was in a round circle by itself, that would be the cyst form. Some of you have that. Here's the cyst, and you can see it has multiple nuclei on the inside, and a wall that's stainable, kind of like a little halo on the outside. They're very hardy. If you boil water for less than 10 minutes in Mexico, you still might have some of these cysts in the water. If you put them in ice and you have frozen water to use for soft drinks or something like that. This is Entamoeba histolytica. Let's go back. Here's the first one. There's the troph, or the trophozoite. That's the active form. Remember, this forms those kind of flask-shaped ulcers and gives you diarrhea, something fierce if you have it. Here's the cyst. This is the part that's transferred, either boiled water or frozen water. One thing that's not so good would be someone pouring a Coke for you. Ever had Mexican Coke?
Yeah.
Coca-Cola? It's really thick. It's a lot of sugar. Enough sugar to kill off most parasites. So if you just drank a Mexican cola with a regular old-fashioned Coca-Cola bottles, they're really cool. They're good.
They're really good.
But if you pour it over ice, it could be you're pouring it over ice that's made from water that has this cyst, and they can survive freezing indefinitely.
Wow.
They're pretty tough guys. Name this beast. Giardia. Yeah, you can see the flagellae on this one. There's a funny little monkey face sort of thing, and also causes diarrhea. Here's this little carrier. Here's Giardia. You can see the nuclei on the inside. Here's a scarus, like the one that's in the bottle up here in the front. And the scarus is usually only one or two are found. But a female scarus can produce thousands of eggs in a single day. So it's possible that if you got contaminated by water or soil that had mature eggs in it, you could have hundreds of them. I'll show you what I mean. But these things are a pretty good size, like the length of your pencil. Big around as a pencil, a little bit less. Here's what the eggs look like in Ascaris. I didn't have you look at this because the adults are so intimidating anyway. But the embryonate, that is, after they're laid, it only takes them 3 weeks before their infective form, and you get them from contaminated food or water that's been in contact with some fecal material. And when they travel, they look like this. They may come creeping out of your mouth, creeping out of your nose, penetrate your brain. Sounds ugly, and it is. Here's somebody with that same situation. This is the bowel full of nematodes, and so they had to resect the bowel and get rid of the nematodes. Name this animal.
Enterobius?
Yeah, you can cheat and look in the lower left. So Enterobius, the females are capable of crawling out the anus, depositing eggs, and then crawling back in, partly because the eggs have to have a reasonable amount of oxygen. This is what they look like on somebody's tail end. That is an anus. Or as Sheldon Cooper said in one of the things for Big Bang Theory, and here's your anus. He's talking about the planet.
Yeah.
Here's a hookworm. This particular one is Nicator, just like you're looking at. There's Ancylostoma as well. We have those in the United States as well as Central and South America. At the top you can see the cutting places, cutting blades. This guy would glom onto a villus and then use anticoagulants to continue the bleeding, and then use the blood that's produced. It's kind of like just attaching to a nipple. And they'll hang on there until they run it dry or there's coagulation. Then they go to another one, bite it, use their salivary glands again to keep the blood flowing.
What are some symptoms?
Diarrhea, anemia, secondary bacterial infections. In this case, because it has the cutting blades at the top and it cuts into the circulatory system, there's actually an immune response. If the parasite's inside the gut, there may be some irritation, but it's actually not penetrating the gut, so you wouldn't have an immune response. But in this case, you might, because it penetrates the wall. So some of you saw this one in the cyst, in the muscle. These are the worms, the larval worms of trichinella. This is a case of trichinosis. Usually when they penetrate the gut and then eventually migrate to the muscle, they cause secondary bacterial infections because there's a lesion in the muscle or in the gut. So you might have a fever as well. It's the most common deal. Name this animal. Clinorchus. So what's a common name? Just to sink that in. No, that's just a company that makes it. So this is Clinorchus. Is this a male or female or an it? It's an it. So any Clinorchus can get together with another Clinorchus. At the top you see the dendritic branches of the ovary and the kind of brown section on the shoulders, as it were. The top is actually the front end of this animal. But that little shoulder section there, those are testes. So this is an it. It's a monoecious animal, has both male and female parts. So as I said, we can call it Clinorchus sinensis. That means Asian liver fluke. But it probably should be called a international fluke because it's found everywhere. As you read through this, I know you didn't read ahead of time because I moved this up to today's lab. This particular group has an infective stage of a freshwater fish. So if you have a freshwater fish and you don't cook it well enough, you could wind up with this parasite, even in the United States. Name this parasite.
That's also a fluke, isn't it?
It's a fluke.
Is it,
Fasciola.
Good, you got it. So this is fasciola. This is the biggest one. And as you saw in some of the specimens over there on the table, it can be quite large. It's pretty flat, but it can clog up the bile duct, and the irritation from the proteins that make up the body of the worm sometimes cause closure by infection in something like, in humans, something like the cystic or the gallbladder. These are some of the cysts that are caused by the spiny-headed worm. Each of those yellow guys right there, like this, there's a cyst of the larvae of those spiny-headed worms. When they pop open, and sometimes they're in the liver as well as the intestine, when they pop open, they leave the body exposed to secondary bacterial infection. It can be pretty bad. These are all Acanthocephala. These are all larvae.
That's inside a fish, right?
Yeah, or acanthocephalans can also be arachnids, as if you ate spiders. But if you eat insects, like mealworms or something like that, that is a common food in the rest of the world. You can wind up with them. Here's the spiny head of the spiny-headed worm. The hooks look pretty impressive. And here's some ulcers caused by amoebiasis in the liver. If you have amoeboid infection in the liver, you could lose your liver, you could croak. Amoebiasis can kill you. Oh, I have two of those? Never mind. So here are the eggs of the Clinorchus. Name this structure.
Yeah, that's the scolex.
Yep, good job. So the scolex has suckers, you can see them on the sides there. It also has little hooks that can be protruded, and that's how they hold on to the inside. You can imagine both ways. It's a really cool place, really good place to live. Temperature's the same all the time, there's about the same pH all the time. There's always food going by. Your wastes are always transported away from you. It's a pretty good place to live if you have the gumption and the structure to hold on for dear life on the inside of the digestive tract. If you don't have hooks or something like that, you have to hold on by weaving in and out of the plica or some other structure like we looked at this morning. So here's a tapeworm. This is Dipylidium, and you can see the proglottids get bigger and bigger and bigger as they go away from the scolex. Now the proglottids in Dipylidium crawl out of the anus, kind of like Enterobius does, but only the larger proglottids crawl out. They dry up and they form what looks like a rice grain. They're usually not associated with where the dog or cat sleeps, or rather eats, but more where they sleep, because they only crawl out when the animal's at rest. So you would find this tapeworm in a dog's bedding, or like a cat bed. Here's a little sketch of the whole thing. Here's the life cycle of the liver fluke. We'll go over that when we get to it in lecture on Wednesday after the quiz. Liver fluke is passed out from the liver of the cow. The larvae in eggs get out. They form what's called a miracidium, a larva, in the lower right-hand side. Then they go to freshwater snails, as you see at the bottom of the cycle there. And from the freshwater snails, they break out and form secondary redia. They insist on the grass, and when the cow eats the grass, cycle completed. This is just for fun. This is a liver fluke. This is a rabbit liver fluke, just to show you the complexity of the internal anatomy. Again, they're monoecious. They have both male and female parts in each individual. Here's schistosomiasis. Some kinds of schistosoma are found in the gut, and they wind up with a distended belly like this. It's because water is retained in the digestive tract when you have the parasite. Name this structure. You can cheat and look in the bottom. Yeah. So then the bottom right, or the bottom left, you see, this is a proglottid. Proglottids get bigger and bigger, and they usually either break open and the eggs pass out, or in the case of Diploidium, the dog and cat tapeworm, they break out. They break open after they've dried up. There's another scolex. This is actually a Tania scolex. This is from a beef tapeworm or a pork tapeworm. It's a little bit different than what you saw with Diploidium. Here's the quick to unload to see if that works. No, I didn't think it would. Anyway, this tapeworm, this is Diploidium caninum, both dogs and cats, and the larvae live in fleas, as we talked about. I think that's all of this slide. Slides are coming. Questions about any of those? Before I turn to you?